and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jenna Lee. I am so glad you are here. Winter has showed her face here in Missouri, and we got our first snowfall, and it is giving us all the warm, fuzzy feelings of Christmas. Today we are setting up the Christmas tree, and I have a wonderful idea for you for homemade gifts. We are going to be making some Christmas jam and some cinnamon swirl sourdough bread. But first we're going to do some decorating. I feel enormously blessed to have a real Christmas tree this year, and I adore Christmas trees. I like to switch it up year by year when it comes to decorating the Christmas tree, and this was the inspiration for my tree this year. I picked up this beautiful ornament with colors of white and brown and green. When it comes to decorating a room or even the Christmas tree, I like to choose an inspiration piece, something to wrap everything else around. So I also got 2 yards of fabric cut. This is a wide striped green linen piece of fabric that I didn't even sew. I kind of like the rough edge on it, and I'm using that as the tree skirt this year. Just really simple. And I also picked up in the sewing department this spool of pearls. When I was in the Christmas section, I was trying to find a garland that I liked because I really loved this kind of old classic garland. It kind of reminds me of the early 1900s, which is the same time period as that our house was built in. And so I was going for that look, and I found this over in the sewing department, and it was actually much more affordable to buy a spool of these pearls in the ribbon section than to actually buy something in the Christmas section. So I bought about 3 of these, and that was able to cover my tree. It wasn't too long until the sun started to go down. The days are just so short. And so I had to continue decorating the following day. And it took me some time to figure out these pearls. Normally you would put the garland on before decorating the tree, but the kids and I did put some ornaments up right when we got the tree. In our house, we have 2 Christmas trees. The kids have their very own Christmas tree upstairs, and I let them decorate it however they please. It's their tree, and they get to do whatever they want with it. And downstairs is where I like to have a say, and this is pretty much Mom's tree the way I like to decorate it. I would love to know what you are putting on your Christmas tree, or what are some of the family traditions that you guys do this time of year. Let's chat in the comments below. Last year we did a tree that was all nature inspired, with oranges and cranberry garlands and dried flowers from the outdoors. I'll make sure to link that video down in the description box so that you can catch up on it later. I did add some brown ornaments and brown ribbon to my tree this year, which I have never done, and I love the depth and warmth that it brought to the tree, and it really ties in nicely with a lot of the wood trim that's going on in this room. It's just so classic and warm. And I added a ribbon on top to cover the zip tie that I had to use to keep the star on the tree this year. And I'm telling you, that star isn't going anywhere. I also picked up a couple of these ceramic ornaments at the craft store. They were all on sale, and I thought it would be kind of fun to make some of our own ornaments. But they are very simple. And this is just how I like things, just delicate, simple, but classy. There's so much joy that comes to making things festive and making them special. I wonder if homemakers in general realize the kind of power that they have in just adding a touch of ribbon here. Family dynamics may be different in every home, and they most certainly are, but we do set the stage in our home, and it does create a sort of feeling or spirit in our home. And we get to choose what that is. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So as you are enjoying the Christmas season and preparing for the Christmas season, keep in mind, what type of feeling do you want in your home this Christmas? The feeling in your home is so much more important than the way it looks or the things that you put in it. And there certainly is no price tag that you can put on the spirit of a home. We get so excited to deck the halls for Christmas that we pull out all of our Christmas storage, and then it feels like a Christmas explosion has gone off in the house, and it's pretty messy. So it's going to take some time to kind of organize some of this stuff. And I find that each year when I get out the Christmas decor, that I don't end up using all of it. I like to sift through the decor, and sometimes I don't use all of the things in the box, and I save it for next year when I want to change up the theme, or sometimes I donate things that I just haven't used in the past couple years, and that's okay too. When it comes to giving out gifts for neighbors and friends for Christmas, I usually love to hand out an assortment of cookies in plates and tins. And I still will do that this year just because I absolutely love Christmas cookies. But I also wanted to try something a little bit different. I often give sourdough bread to the neighbors, and they love it. And so I wanted to try a recipe that I found on the internet. It is a Christmas jam, and it's made up of cranberries and strawberries. And I thought I would just make some mini loaves of my favorite sourdough bread recipe that I make every single week, and just make them into mini loaves and put a cinnamon swirl through them. And I thought that would be such a beautiful pair, giving out a little Christmas jam with a little Christmas sourdough loaf. So I will be putting this recipe down below. I haven't really shared with you guys for a while how I make this sandwich loaf, but this is how it starts out. I start out with a fresh fed sourdough starter. One good way to see if your sourdough starter is ready to be used is by pouring it onto your bowl of water, and if it floats upon the top of the water, then it is fermented well and ready to use. If it sinks to the bottom, then it still needs more time to ferment. This recipe calls for extra virgin olive oil and honey. Just be sure that your honey isn't too hot. If you've heated it up, I had to heat mine up. It was crystallized, so I was careful that it wasn't too hot, or else it will kill all of the good bacteria in your sourdough, which is your rising agent. And I do use a scale whenever it comes to sourdough. Most sourdough recipes actually are in grams. I know that can sound a little bit intimidating. Here in the US, we don't often bake with grams, but it really is incredibly easy to do. And it's definitely more precise. This is a canister of freshly ground wheat. I just grind my wheat berries once a week and fill up this canister, and I probably go through it about once a week, especially since I make this bread recipe a lot. I actually quadruple this bread recipe weekly, and so I have a sticky note pasted on my fridge that has all of the ingredient amounts that I need to quadruple this recipe, and I just follow that. So I'm going to have to figure out how to divvy it up into some smaller loaves to go into these small loaf pans I have. I start out by mixing it with a fork really trying to incorporate the wet and dry ingredients. And then once that is mostly mixed, then I go to using my hand. But you definitely could use a KitchenAid mixer of some sort as well. Once that is thoroughly mixed all the way through, then I let it rest for about 30 minutes to autolyse. It's pretty standard for all sourdough bread recipes to let it rest, and that just allows the grains to soak up all the moisture. While the bread is doing its autolyse, then I'm going to get ready to do some canning. There are lots of recipes on the internet for Christmas jam, but this recipe is based on strawberries and cranberries, and it calls for about 6 cups of strawberries. I'm using frozen today, and 2 cups of cranberries. I'm using fresh cranberries, and it used about 1 bag from the grocery store. And it also calls for 5 cups of sugar. When it comes to making jam, it's safe to stick to the recipe, even if it seems like a lot of sugar. There are low sugar recipes that you can find out there, but make sure that you're sticking to the recipe that you're using and not cutting down on the sugar, because your jam just won't set up right. This jam smells so delicious because of all of the warm spices that are in it, and that's what gives it kind of that Christmas twist. So this recipe also calls for some cinnamon, ginger, allspice, and cloves, and I will be sure to link the full recipe down below. So after you've added all your ingredients, you're going to want to bring them to a boil. I had forgotten to put all of my fruit into a blender or a food processor, so I'll have to get to that in a second. But as I'm making jam, I'm just popping over to the bread dough and giving it a stretch and a fold. I just fold the dough over itself, and then I add a wet rag to keep it nice and moist so it doesn't dry out. And I repeat this process about 3 times. I like to have my sourdough going in the daytime, so I can be doing other chores in the kitchen, like doing the dishes and cooking and all sorts of things. And that way I don't forget to get in all of my stretch and folds and tending to the dough like I should. After you've done those 3 stretch and folds, though, you leave your dough to rest and ferment for about 6 hours. Each time you go to do a stretch and fold on your dough, you're going to notice that the dough becomes more elastic and that gluten is really taking shape. The dough is going to be easier to work with and less wet and gooey. You want to kind of create this giant ball that's nice and tight and elastic. And that is what gives your bread a nice lift when it goes to bake. So now our jam is starting to boil and that sugar is starting to dissolve. I'm going to quickly put it into the blender so that I don't have giant chunks of strawberries and cranberries, and blend that to a nice consistency, and then I'll put it back in the pot to continue to cook. have my water canner full of hot boiling water ready to go, and I like to use that to sanitize my utensils and tools that I'm using to can. Anything that's going to be touching the inside of these cans or jars needs to be sterilized. So I just put my jars in there to the hot boiling water and let them sanitize for a minute or two. I realized I was just kind of getting by on some of my canning utensils, and so I got some fresh new canning supplies. I picked up some of these superb canning lids. They're actually thicker. I don't know if you can see in the shop, but the blue seal ring is actually a thicker ring than what I'm used to using and is supposed to be stronger, a more promising seal. It is so sad when you prepared some canned goods that take hours and hours and they don't seal. So it's definitely worth it to invest into some good canning lids, I have come to find. And so you can find these down below. Actually, all of the canning stuff that I'm using today is from Kui Housewares. I will be linking them down below, and make sure to use my code because you can actually get a discounted rate on all of your goods from Kui Housewares. So thanks for sponsoring this video, Kui Housewares. So this is a vital part of canning, is getting the pectin right. So I brought my fruit to a boil for 1 minute and I took it off the heat. And now I'm adding 2 packets of liquid pectin and stirring that all in before I put it back on the stove. Then I'm going to add it back to the heat and bring it to a full boil, so that even when you are stirring, those bubbles are still coming to the top. It is in a full rolling boil. And I'm going to watch the clock for exactly 1 minute. And this is the process that's really going to thicken up your jam. And then I'm going to take it right off the heat, let it cool. I've sanitized my superb sealing lids and all the jars, and it's ready to roll. Every time I share basic homemaking skills with you guys, I am reminded that there are so many wonderful homemakers and men and women in this audience who know so much, and even more than I. But remember to do all the basics, like leaving 1/4 inch space above your fruit so it doesn't mess with your sealing lid. Wipe off the top of the jar so that it doesn't, of course, mess up your sealing. And it should be good to go. I always get excited when I receive something that is homemade for Christmas. There is so much love and time and effort that goes into these homemade gifts, and it makes it all the more meaningful. And I think it always tastes better. With the extra sourdough starter, I always make sourdough pancakes, and I just prepare it the night before by pouring in about a cup, maybe a cup and a half of sourdough starter. I basically just use what I have left over. And then I match that same amount with some milk and that same amount with some more flour. Oftentimes I use whole grain wheat. I'm just using my bread flour at this moment. And then I mix it all together and put it in the fridge, and I add the rest of the ingredients the following day or whenever we want to make pancakes. Sometimes I leave this batter in the fridge for a few days. So you can see that my sourdough bread has overproofed, and that's okay. I took a little bit more time getting out of bed this morning. The baby was up a lot last night, so I gave myself some grace. And that just means that the bread is going to have a little bit more of a sour taste to it, but I think that makes it all the more delicious. It's not going to be too sour. So now I'm giving it another stretch and fold, just working that dough. I'm going to let it rest for a moment while I prepare a surface to roll it out and shape it. I never use any antibacterial soaps on my countertops when I'm working with sourdough. Just beware of using bleach or any antibacterial sprays on your countertops, because it can kill the good bacteria in your sourdough that you've worked so hard to cultivate. I have these tiny little bread pans that I picked up from the grocery store to make little loaves in. I wish I had a lot more of them. I would have made more of these little loaves, so I might be doing more of that in the future. But I'm just rolling them out and then sprinkling a generous amount of cinnamon and sugar. And then I'm going to roll it up nice and tight. You want to keep the tension on the outside of the dough. That's going to give more of a lift for your loaf. And then I wanted to try something a little bit fun. So I'm cutting the roll right down the center, and I'm going to attempt to give it a braid so that you can see some of those pretty colors of cinnamon swirling on the top of the loaf. And then lastly, for our gift, we are going to wrap some fabric over our cute little Christmas jams. Maybe you'll recognize this fabric. This is actually from my pleated lampshade that I made for the living room, and I had some excess fabric left over. And I love how the red pulls, the red from the jam. It's so pretty. Okay, so grab your notepad. I'm going to tell you the rest of this pancake recipe. So this is probably more of like a closer to double. If it's 2 cups of sourdough starter, then I double this recipe. So it's close to that. I add 2 eggs, about 1/4 a cup of honey or sugar, about 4 teaspoons of baking powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon or so of baking soda. You can tell I'm not really measuring this very closely. And then some cinnamon, and about 1/4 a cup to 1/3 a cup of oil. Sometimes I use butter or coconut oil. In this case, I'm just using some vegetable oil. I mix that all together. Oh, and don't forget the salt. I've done that before. And they make delicious sourdough pancakes. These are my family's favorite. And these loaves turned out so beautiful. I love how they're busting out the top of these tiny little loaf pans. My plan is to wrap these loaves in some saran wrap, maybe tie a little ribbon on them, and hand them out to some of my neighbors with some jam. And I think it's a perfect pair. Let me know what you're planning on doing for the holiday season. What are some of your favorite gift ideas? Let me know in the comments down below. Remember to subscribe. It's always free to subscribe to a channel here on YouTube, and I'll catch you next time. Love you lots.